Okay, so let's kick it off. Very warm welcome to all of you and to this first meeting of our new group on disaster-related statistics in Asia and the Pacific. My name is Rika Hansen, and I oversee the work at ESCAP on economic and environment statistics, and that includes disaster-related statistics. And I've so been looking forward to saying welcome today. It's been a long road to get this new group up and running. So I'm so glad to see so many people showing up today. Now, I do have a very brief presentation to kick us off here. And what I want to first do, because we are all meeting virtually, is to give a little overview of what kind of group we have in terms of participation. It's such when we invited for anyone who's interested in becoming a member of this group, we sent out the invitation to everyone we could possibly think of have been involved in the work on disaster-related statistics, and also more broadly reaching out specifically to statistical offices and national disaster management agencies to get as broad a participation as possible. And what we see is that we have I'm just trying to get some music to go away here. Maybe this is a good point in time to ask all participants at any time to mute your microphones unless you are speaking. So thank you very much for that. Now, what we are seeing in terms of the initial membership of this group is that we have two big groups of members, one from national disaster management agencies, another from national statistical offices. We do have a third group, which is relatively large as well, and those are people who are representing either a regional or international organizations, such as myself. These people come from United Nations agencies, but also from other regional and international agencies. We have members from all parts of Asia and the Pacific. We have members from the east and northeastern parts of Asia, from the North and Central Asian part. We have members from the Pacific, and we have members from South Asia, Southwest Asia, and the largest group is actually from Southeast Asia, which is the part of Asia I'm also sitting in right now. I'm sitting in Thailand, in Bangkok. We also do have a few participants from outside of Asia Pacific, from the Americas and from Europe. So a warm welcome to all of you. We also looked a bit at the people who've signed up, whether they are women or men. And there we may have a little work to do. We have so far around 30 female members and around 50 male members. So let's see if we can even out that balance, that imbalance as we go forward. Can you please move to the next slide, Paul? Thank you. So I wanted to say a little bit about the background for why this group has been established. And I came up with just 2 bullet points because I don't want to speak too long. Can you just show the second bullet point on that slide as well? Can we please get the whole slide shown? Thank you. So I came up with 2 points. One is there's been a group of experts working for the past almost 5 years. They have looked very much at what is disaster-related statistics, what kind of terminology, what kind of definitions should we work with, how do we produce statistics so that we can make it coherent at a local, regional, global scale, so we can start comparing our data to an extent that we haven't been able to do before. How do we define disaster-related statistics so that what comes out of our production of statistics is coherent to what all countries have signed up to in terms of reporting to the Sendai framework, for example. That work is done. The result was what we have called the disaster-related statistics framework. That is something that's been looked at and agreed by all the chief statisticians in Asia and the Pacific. And our new group really marks a shift from talking about the definitions, the normative standards, into implementing. So we've talked about what is disaster-related statistics. This group has been established to help everyone start producing statistics using this framework that's been developed. The terms of reference of this group outlines a number of things we can do. It's a relatively long list. We need to prioritize. This is one of the reasons we are meeting today. But just to mention a few of the functions that have been thought about for this group is, well, this could be a platform to discuss, exchange experiences. It could function as a pool of expertise that could be deployed all over the region to provide support and assistance. It could be a group that develops training materials. It could be a group that coordinates recommendations on how to compile statistics, how to work together at the national level. It could be a group that develops tools to facilitate reporting, for example, on the SDGs or the Sendai framework. It's a group that could make sure that what's going on in other parts of the world is nicely coordinated with what's going on in Asia and the Pacific. The modality of work for this group has been established. We've been asked for this group to function as a community of practice. And this is something we can maybe discuss a little bit more what that means in practice, because no one has defined this. My immediate take on this is it means this group should function in not a particular formal way. It should be practice-focused, action-focused. How we do that is something you are all welcome to provide your inputs to. There's a few principles for our work. One is that everything we do needs to be aligned with national priorities. And all our technical work should be coherent with what's outlined in the Sendai framework and the reporting arrangements. So let me move to what we have set out to do today. Can we see the next slide, please? We have 2 hours to discuss. It's a virtual forum, which means that short meetings are good. It's a matter of doing things where we can all be active and engage. And my personal preference is I'd rather have more frequent meetings that are shorter than very long meetings. Today, we'll discuss the expectations to this group, as I just mentioned. We'll choose the leadership of the group. We are very fortunate. We have a few people who've expressed interest. I'll get back to that later. We'll set the stage for our work. We have invited some partners to speak about the Sendai framework, for example, and some of the other drivers and motivators for our work. We'll also hear from a number of countries on what's going on disaster-related statistics at the moment, or what's not going on but should be going on. And then finally, we'll take a few minutes at the end to reflect on the way forward for this group. We have been preparing at ESCAP to support the work of this group. We are here, of course, to facilitate meetings of the group, facilitate discussions among members of the group. We are in the process of establishing a community of practice electronic platform that we can use as our common reference point. We are initiating a situation analysis report for the region. You will all hear more about this. I find this is another fundamental piece of knowledge that we all need to make sure that the priorities of this group really matches what you all feel should be priorities, or what you all feel are particular challenges in this area. To get everyone, also newcomers, up to speed quickly, we are developing an e-learning course on disaster-related statistics following this disaster-related statistics framework I mentioned. This is something we work very closely with ESCAP's statistical training institution, SIAP, on. We should very soon be ready to launch it, and this is something I'll be asking all of you to take and also comment on. We want this to be good and useful. And finally, ESCAP is also here to make sure that our work links to what's going on elsewhere in the world. We will be calling for membership of a new global interagency and expert group on disaster-related statistics that will function under the Global United Nations Statistical Commission. This is a group that will be co-chaired by the United Nations Disaster Risk Reduction, UNDRR, and ESCAP. And we also have very close ties and want to continue those close ties with a task force on measuring hazardous events and disasters, which is led out of Europe, the Economic Commission for Europe. So this is a bit about the preparatory work that's been going on sort of in my shop and at ESCAP and elsewhere in ESCAP. I hope that this will help all of us facilitate some action going forward. So this is it for me as a brief introduction here. And I will now hand over to Pucci to get a little sense of your respective expectations to the group and the meeting as well. So Pucci, over to you.
Thank you, Rike. Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I will be with you in this technical working group for some time. And this is a time for me to introduce to some of you, if you have not been familiar with, some of the important tools that we'll be using for communicating and being interactive in a meeting. Knowing that this meeting is virtual, you know, it could be a very boring meeting, it could be one-sided and so on. So we see it's important that you get involved in this. So we are using an application that's called Mentimeter, right? So what you can do now is, if you have your device with you, mobile phone, smartphone, right? You can produce it with you, and you can, if you have a QR reader, you can just simply point your phone to your screen and you can scan the QR code, right? That's the first way. Number two is you can click also from the chat box. In the chat box, we also put the link that you can click. Or you go to menti.com and then you enter the code 595954 and 6. Now, since we're going to be using this quite frequently throughout the online meeting now and onward, I would like you to take a little bit of time and get familiar But we can try this particular exercise now. If you like to scan that code there with your QR code reader, or you type in the code after you go to menti.com, you shall receive in your mobile phone a question, which is in 1 or 2 words, what are your expectations of this meeting? Right? So you can enter in your mobile phone and you can send submit. Would you try that? There you go. Yes, let's have some minutes to get it there. So I hope you find this interaction interesting, actually, because we can capture immediately what you have submitted. As it's going now, you expect from this meeting some sort of expertise, some learning, some new knowledge, some statistical analysis, right? And this will keep going until we have enough participants. Right now, as you see on the screen, 25 persons have entered their expectation of this meeting. All right. Some other words that appear there.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Puji.
Yes.
Would you please repeat how we scan the QR code? Sorry.
Yes. You go to QR code, or you go to menti.com. Menti.com. All right. And that should give you a screen that requests for a code number, correct? And then you enter 5959546. That will be the manual way of participating. Okay. So far, ladies and gentlemen, we have 37 participants entering their poll into what they expect from this meeting. The way I read it anyway, it looks like it's pretty consistent with what Rike has just explained in his introduction part. Most of you expect to learn something, to gain knowledge, to expand your network, all right? And to learn from others about statistics, about statistical analysis, and so on. Right now it's 41. I think, Rike, this should give us some idea of what colleagues expect from this meeting, and I would like to pass it on to you.
Good, thank you. Thank you very much, Puji, and thank you to all of you who put in your words. I see, yes, as Puji says, there's some agreement we all want to learn, but there's a lot of inputs that are also very different. So I think we can look forward to a very rich range of activities of this group, which is great, but something to manage also. Let's see how we go. Let me move on to the next point of our agenda, which is really to choose our leadership. And as I briefly mentioned, we do have 2 people who've expressed interest. We've prompted them a little bit, I have to admit. We would like to suggest that we elect as a chair of this group Ms. Aryuna Chandrabal. Ms. Aryuna is the head of the Foreign Cooperation Division of the National Emergency Management Agency in Mongolia. And we also suggest that this group elects as a vice chair Ms. Hermanwati Mahaini, who is the director of the Social Resilience Statistics Division in the National Statistics Office of Indonesia, which we all know as BPS Indonesia. So I put forward these 2 suggestions for our leadership, and I will give all of you 5 seconds. So 5 seconds of silence where anyone can put their hand up if they protest, or you are also welcome to put your hand up if you would like to volunteer to be an additional vice chair. So let me just keep silence here for 5-10 seconds so all of you have a chance to react to this suggestion of having a chair from Mongolia and a vice chair from Indonesia. 5, 4, 3, 1, done. All right, so let's just applaud them all. You don't need to unmute, then the connection will go haywire. But congratulations to Ms. Aryuna and Ms. Hermanwati. And I think we've already evened out the gender imbalance in our group a little bit, because we may have more male members, but we do have 2 females in our membership, and we just have an additional volunteer, a suggestion for an additional vice chair. Fiti would like to be a second vice chair, which is wonderful. Thank you very much to Fiji National Disaster Management Office to come in with that suggestion. It would create a good geographical balance in the leadership of the group to have a member from the Pacific as well. So I will give everyone 5 seconds again to agree or disagree of an additional vice chair to the group from Fiji. 5, 4, 3, 1, done. Wonderful.
Okay.
Yes, and we have agreement in the chat as well. That's just wonderful. So congratulations to our new leadership. And it is time for me to give you all a chance to meet and greet your new chair. So Ms. Aryuna, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Vicky. Thank you, Vicky, and dear ESCAP colleagues, members of the Technical Working Group on Disaster-Related Statistics in Asia and the Pacific, and their representatives from the international organizations. I'm both humbled and honored to be elected as a chair of the Technical Working Group. Today, as we know that we are having our first meeting during this very challenging time, COVID-19 pandemic, in which many countries have been facing extreme challenges to overcome health and socio-economic crisis. As we all know that the member states were called for strengthening evidence-based policy making for disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation and we all were invited to improve the quality and availability of data related to disasters by ESCAP resolution. Also, disaster-related statistics in Asia and the Pacific was entitled to take the mandate, whereby establishing an expert group consists of statisticians and disaster management experts to work towards developing a basic range of disaster-related statistics. Also, the recommendation of the expert group to transform a technical working group was supported by the UN ESCAP Committee on Statistics, which was held in 2018. And finally, now here to serve as the members of the Technical Working Group on Disaster-Related Statistics in Asia and the Pacific. I really look forward to work with you all, mostly through electronic platforms. Also, I would like to thank UN ESCAP team for serving as the secretary of the Technical Working Group. And to save the time, lastly, I would like to share my opinion regarding the group name. As Ricky mentioned during her introduction part, I think we need to think about the change of our group name. When asked for my interest to chair this group, the first thing I noticed was the name, a technical working group. I'm not sure this is the best name, and we will be working as a collective, mainly virtually, and be practice oriented. Our terms of reference also state that we should work as a community of practice. So I propose we reflect this more directly in our name and refer to ourselves as the community of practice, disaster-related statistics in Asia and the Pacific. That will be like a community of practice on disaster-related statistics rather than a technical working group on disaster-related statistics. But of course, we all know that I cannot and I will not make a literal decision on this. So please let me know your preference regarding the name in the Mentimeter poll. When you enter the Mentimeter poll, you will see two options. The first one will be a technical working group on disaster-related statistics in Asia and the Pacific. And the second option will be community practice on disaster-related statistics in Asia and the Pacific. I believe that you will choose the right name for our group. Thank you very much.
Five, 9, 5, 9, 5, 4, 6.
This is very exciting.
I know. It's almost like a presidential election in the US.
All right, so we seem to have, oh, we are back on 50-50 now. Okay, we'll just give it another 10 seconds. Yeah, is that all right with you, Madam Chair?
Yes, of course.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much, Ariona, for guiding us through this. Is there any further comments from your end before we move on in the program?
No, Ricky, thank you very much. It was my great pleasure.
Okay, and congratulations again on being the chair of this new group, which I don't know what we are going to call now. I see a funny comment in the meeting chat. It says people seem to continue to want to learn, not to practice. Haha. So I think we have to more or less call this an even vote. And my interpretation is that we probably, for the immediate future, should continue with the name the group actually has then in terms of its terms of reference. I feel it's too even to call, but now it's moving again. You know what? I suggest we close the poll now and we pick up the name at a later point in time. But for now, the group keeps its given name, which is a technical working group. Is that a fair way to go about this?
I think so. Yeah, Ricky.
Okay. Okay, so thank you very much, all of you, for voting. This was very exciting. I think we need to do more of this kind of polls. All right, now we will move on. We have a leadership of the group, but given the virtual format here and the fact it's a new group. The Secretariat has been asked to sort of continue to run the meeting at least today. So I will continue to be emceeing. And it is my great pleasure now to invite Ms. Leticia Rosano, who is the director of ESCAP's Asia and the Pacific Center for the Development of Disaster Information. This is a center that's known under the acronym APDIM, and Leticia will be taking us through a panel with the aim really being to set the stage for the work of the technical working group. So Leticia, the floor is yours for the next 30 minutes, and I'll be a bit strict on the timing here because we do have a very full program for today. So please take it away, Leticia.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Rika, for the kind introduction and invitation to this extremely interesting meeting. And good morning, good afternoon, actually, to all participants on the call. It is really a pleasure and an honor for me to be here, and also for APDIM as an institution, one of the regional institutions of ESCAP, to be in this meeting. We work closely with the Statistics Division, and I really look forward to this discussion and the conversation of this meeting. As Erika said, the name of our institute institution explains a little bit our focus. We work on disaster information management. And so I'm really looking forward to hearing this conversation. The panel today that we're working on is setting the stage for our work, drivers, focus, and challenges. We have 3 speakers whom are all on the call, so I would kindly ask them to turn on their videos and so that we can have a fruitful conversation together. I'm also keeping an eye on the chat, so feel free to add any comments or question there. The first speaker is Tim Wilcox. he's a program manager of the United Nations Disaster Risk Reduction Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific. So team from UNDRR joins us. Then we have Ermawanti Marhani. I see in her chat, she calls her Tamu in brackets next to her name, if this is how you'd like to be called. Why is reporting to Sendai monitoring important is the topic of her presentation. And then we have Sara Valero, Regional Advisor on Gender Statistics of the UN Women Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific. So these are our three speakers. I would, the first one on our speaker is Tim Wilcox. And before I give the floor to him, one point of reflection from me is to really be mindful that the statistics and data is about also using it, not only collecting it, but applying it and using it. So I will be challenging the speakers on this point as we go forward, because it's a big focus for us in UPDIM to make sure that all the data that is available out there and the statistics are then applied and used for the risk reduction purposes that we look forward to achieving. So Tim, I can't see you on my screen, but I'm sure you're there. I saw you were in the call. Do you want to?
Sure. Yeah. I think I
Okay.
have
Cool.
PowerPoints. So
Floor is yours. Go ahead.
Thanks, Letitia. Thanks very much, everyone. I think I have a PowerPoint slide. Here we go. Apologies for lots of words there. I've put more words in there than I like to normally with my my presentations, because I know that there's a lot of us here who come from a non-English speaking background. So I know everyone likes lots of detail. So I've made the notes for you here, so you don't have to take any notes. Just listen to what I'm saying. So first of all, if we talk about the gaps and the current needs of the Sendai Framework Monitor, so the Monitor is an online platform where countries input data in terms of how the country is progressing in implementing the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction. And countries do this every year. What we're seeing, it's been around now for about almost 3 years now. And so people have been reporting since March 2018. And what we're seeing is that the depth of annual member state reporting is quite mixed. There's 7 targets, A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. But targets A, B, and E are okay in terms of countries putting data in there, but the rest are a little weak. A and B are about death and mortality and morbidity, the number of people who are getting sick and dying from disasters, and E is about national strategies. So far we're seeing about 26 countries in Asia Pacific have reported some kind of data online. So it's about 2/3. And the breakup in the region is about 20 in Asia and about 6 in the Pacific. The Pacific number there also includes Australia and New Zealand. And we know that, you know, we're looking at it closely, there are a lot of capacity issues in the National Disaster Management Offices that are responsible for reporting on the Sendai Framework. They're in the SIDS, in the Pacific SIDS, as well as Asia SIDS. And so that has a big impact in terms of their ability to report annually on the Sendai Framework Monitor. In terms of gaps, we're seeing, you know, these gaps in the targets that people are focusing on, but also in terms of data collection. So what we're finding is that not all the data that's needed to report on the monitor is actually being collected by the countries, and not all of it's actually being reported. So even if a country does have the data, it's not necessarily being put into the system. There's lots of different reasons for that. I won't go into too much detail, but obviously one of the main reasons I think is that, you know, rushed reporting. So if countries are expected to report, you know, data each year on the 31st of March, then of course we're all human and most people start reporting usually around, you know, the 30th of March. The 29th of March. So another gap is that we're finding, particularly with sex, age and disability, disaggregated data globally is very limited. Countries are putting information about geography and hazard type. Some are putting in information on age, but generally speaking, we're finding with disability, it's very weak globally. There's literally only a handful of countries that are putting in that data on disability. Sex data is also a little weak, but we know though that the countries do often have that, but it's not necessarily being reported. Which leads to these needs that we have next, which is, we feel that basically looking at the problems of why information is not being reported and why some is that really it comes down to supporting countries with coordination within the government to collect and report that data. What we're finding is when we talk to national disaster management officers is that they don't necessarily know where the data is. And if they do know where the data is, they can't get it from the other government ministry. There's lots of examples of this. So helping countries with the coordination within their own government system to get that data and report it's very important. They need further support with the collection of SAD data. Advocacy is really important here, but we're finding that advocacy only takes us so far before we actually need to physically start helping countries with it. Most national disaster management officers I'm speaking to want to report SAD data, but they don't know where to get it. Maybe their partners are not collecting it, or the government ministries are not collecting it, and they need help with that. Also need to encourage use of partner and NGO data, particularly for SAD data. We know that, Red Cross societies and NGOs often collect a lot of information on sex, age and disability, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of appetite from the governments to actually want to use this non-government data. Could be some various reasons for that, but we really need to encourage that, particularly if the government doesn't have it. Also need to increase data sharing and coordination within the government at all levels. This is a problem globally, and it doesn't matter if you're a developing country or a highly developed country, it's widespread. We're finding a lot of highly developed countries, the information's at the local level, but it's not going to the national level at all. It's not being shared. So this is a problem. We need to kind of increase that, and it comes down to this coordination aspect, helping the NDMOs to do that, to coordinate with the local levels and other government ministries. But also, critically, we need to strengthen the relationships between the national statistics officers and the NDMOs. Most NDMOs do not actually have a data person, but the National Statistics Office does, right? That's what they do. They're statisticians. They live and breathe this. They want to help. And there are some good examples of this. In Fiji, for example, they've teamed up with the Fiji Bureau of Statistics to help them with that. I think Tonga as well. And Indonesia is another good example. And I think, that relationship is very important because they can help each other out. And which brings us to this linking with the national framework for disaster-related statistics. That's really important. But more importantly, if I can go back, just as I finish, if I can go back to Letitia's point on the use of data, I think the key issue here really is about if we can show people that how to use this data and how it helps inform their policy and activities, then they will want to report information into the Sendai Framework Monitor. That's really critical. And at the moment, we're trying to improve the monitor so the analytics component of it can do that. But I'll finish there. Sorry, Letitia, I could talk all day. I apologize. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. So my prompt came right at the end of your presentation, correct?
Yeah.
Thank you. So we just quickly move on to the next speaker. And I just steal the floor to do a little commercial for UPDIM, who actually recently produced and is just finalizing guidelines for reporting on the Sendai framework, specifically on sand and dust storms. So with the permission of Rike and the chair of this group, community of practice, however you will decide to call yourselves, we will be gladly sharing the document with you for your information and use, hopefully. So the next speaker is the Director of Social Resilience Statistics Division in Indonesia, Ermawanti Marhani, and she will tell us why is it reporting to the Sendai Framework Monitoring important. So the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Letitia. Good afternoon, everybody. Our moderator, Ms. Letitia Rosano, Director of ESCAP Asia and Pacific Center for the Development of Disaster Information, distinguished TWG chairperson, member of Technical Working Group ESCAP, colleagues, and ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Statistic Indonesia, BPS, and the National Disaster Management Agency colleagues, and the other Indonesian in this group, first of all, I would like to thank for organizing this meeting and inviting me to be a member of the Asia Pacific Technical Working Group on Disaster related statistics. Now I will sharing with you the perspective from Indonesia regarding the topic of why is reporting to the SINDA monitors become important for Indonesia. Ladies and gentlemen, we consider that it is important for us to monitor and report our disaster management along the line of SINDA framework. This because of the following reason. The first reason that the disaster management is one of the priority in the medium-term development plan for our country for 2020 until 2024, in which our government set the disaster risk reduction target in quantitative number. This includes the percentage of recovery of damaged infrastructure, speed and coverage of early warning system, and reduction in the economic losses. It also used for the government to prepare the aid for the people who get a disaster. Indonesia has been applying the SINDA framework for disaster risk reduction to frame national direction, policy, and programs. Our country was actively negotiating the term of the SINDA framework and consequently also trying to apply the provision in our policy, institutional arrangement, and programs. This is also extend to our commitment to monitor and report the progress of SINDA implementation in the numerical form. Linking our disaster data with SINDA reporting provide a strategy link to the SDGs monitoring and reporting. Aligning our data with SINDA allow us the disaster data to communicate with the other data from other development sector in the SDGs platform. Ladies and gentlemen, since early 2000, Indonesia has been utilizing the Disinventar Disaster Registry in a data collection platform and mechanism. Using this platform, BNPB, the National Disaster Management Agency, has been able to aggregate disaster data from local and sectoral to a centralized system at the National Operation Center. BNPB has been perfecting this Disinventar database into the DB and INARIS. This database are online geospatial platform that at this moment contains some disaster risk data of 500 districts, each detailing the hazard, vulnerability, exposure, and capacity that are compiled into risk indexes. In the context of COVID-19, BNPB is expanding this database into INARIS personal, where anyone could check their personal risk context at any given time and physical location. For the purpose of enriching the SINDA expert report, BNPB conducted inter-ministerial and multi-sectoral data conference to compile, verify, and validate the disaster data. In terms of strengthening the disaster statistics, BNPB and BPS, the National Statistics Office, have established on an MOU. And since last year, we have jointly been developing the Indonesia One Disaster Data as a national framework for disaster-related statistics. Ladies and gentlemen, now let me share with you the progress in developing the Indonesian One Disaster Data. In the background, it is worth noting that the establishment of disaster statistics as a part of the national statistics system has been one of quick wins target of BPS Statistik Indonesia. So far, BPS has been providing the basic statistic disaster management both for BNPB, relevant ministry and agency, as well as a local government. BPS also incorporate disaster consideration into our population census, and we have 3 yearly village potential statistics and also the socio-economic census. We include the question regarding disaster data in those three survey and census. The ambition is to establish a statistical framework that allows disaster data to have common standard so that it will improve the implementation of disaster management, being comparably across time and geographical areas. And it is useful in communicating with the data of other development sector. In this regard, BPS and BNPB, with the support of UNFPA, last year, we have completed the Indonesia One Disaster Data publication. This is a disaster-related statistical framework that is developed under the auspices of the President's One Data Policy and One Data Policy. In this policy, the President designed BPS to be the statistics advisor for the One Data Policy. We are pleased to share with you the Indonesia One Disaster Data book, a document provided as background document in this meeting. We developed this framework by deriving it from ESCAP's disaster-related statistical framework that was developed by the ESCAP working group in the last 7 years. This framework is already aligned with the Sendai framework and is integrated in the SDG national monitoring and reporting. Ladies and gentlemen, under BNPB's leadership and BPS as the statistic advisor, we have conducted the multi-sectoral and interministerial consultative process over the year. We are transitioning from completing the statistical framework into technical work. This includes determining the data standard, the hazard typologies in line with the recent UNDRR hazard classification, disaster threshold, and other technical consideration. At the same time, the interagency group is also drafting a specific national policy for the Indonesia One Disaster Data. I'm pleased to share with you that the Ministry of National Development Planning has adopted the Indonesian One Disaster Data to be one among national development priorities under the Indonesian One Data Policy for 2022. Discussion is also on the way to design the provinces of Yogyakarta as a pilot sub-national application of the framework. At this moment, the province of Bali is also considering establishing the One Disaster Data on a pilot basis. We are also honored to have host for ESCAP's regional training on disaster-related statistics framework at BPS last year. In this regard, BPS look forward to adapting any regional training on disaster statistics into the specific context of Indonesia. We stand ready to cooperate with fellow countries in the region to advance regional training in this regard. Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, by aligning the disaster monitoring and reporting with Sendai framework, we have been able to put into order our disaster data. This has been beneficial to upgrade disaster data to become more consistent, comparable, and being aligned with the SDG sector. The alignment also helped us to reinforce the consistency of Sendai framework with our national disaster management system. I hope that you will find this sharing useful, and we are looking forward to lively exchange during the question and answer segment in the session. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Director Marhani, for your interesting presentation. And it is indeed really a best case example and best practice example of how Indonesia is tackling this work, and I'm sure, no doubt, we will have a lot of interesting conversations on this. Our next speaker is Sara Valero, Regional Advisor of Gender Statistics, UN Women, from the Regional Office of Asia and the Pacific. As we have very little time left, I'll give her the floor right away, and really would like to invite participants to put comments or questions in the chat line, so that we can kind of get ahead as we hear the presentation from Sara. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I was trying to make this full screen, but I don't know, for some reason it's not going full screen. Anyway, so why integrating gender into disaster statistics? This was the question given to me, and indeed a very relevant question. And my answer is really, why do we calculate statistics to begin with, right? Like, so the reason why we calculate statistics is really so we can make informed decisions. So the same answer applies for gender statistics, right? It's really about making sure that we have this gender data to design comprehensive responses to cope with disasters and to be prepared for disasters. So it's a matter of knowing how men and women are really dealing differently with all these issues around disasters. So I decided to put here a few different topics that are, you know, quote unquote classic topics for disaster statistics, and give you a bit of the gender angle for all of this, kind of like to make the points. So the first one, classic case, calculating statistics around deaths, injuries, health services. We know from looking at non-disaster situations that men and women there are gender differentials in terms of where they are placed in the map sometimes. So for instance, we know by looking at slum data that in some countries women are more likely to live in slums, while in some other countries men are more likely to live in slums. We know that you know, women are more likely to have certain jobs like teachers or work in the tourism industry, while men are more likely to work in like mines or quarries or logging industry, right? So their location in the map is going to matter when a disaster strikes, right? So looking at deaths and injuries disaggregated by sex is very, very relevant. But in addition, when a disaster strikes, the types of healthcare that are available to people and whether people really have health insurance to access this care is also going to have some gender differentials, right? And for instance, a disaster strikes and we might have, you know, general practitioners in the shelters on the disaster sites, but we may not have perhaps OB-GYN doctors to care for pregnant women, right? So all of this kind of matters from a gender angle. Then, you know, the second type is really displacement statistics, right? What happens when people are moved out of the disaster location and into a different location, right? So do they become internally displaced people? Do they move together with the family, or do they split up the family? And then if that's the case, then who goes with the children? Who has that responsibility to care for the children? Similarly, once people are in the shelters or in camps, then what kind of essential services do they have? Are people able to see doctors, like I was saying, for instance, very specific types of medical care for pregnant women, or do they have access to hygiene products, and how's the safety looking in those camps, right? So these are all issues that matter from a gender perspective, and therefore it's important to disaggregate our data and to collect and use, indeed, data on all these topics. The third box is the blue box, and it's in my opinion, one of the most important boxes here, which is really people's capacity to cope, because obviously the disaster strikes and there's this immediate need to look at deaths and injuries, etc. But, you know, in the medium to longer term, it's really how people can cope with the disaster. So, for instance, if in a family, the land that the family uses to grow agricultural products is owned by the husband, and the husband dies, then whether, depending on the inheritance laws, or depending on the ownership, whose name is in the title of the land, perhaps women may not be likely to use that land in the future, and that, you know, compromises their livelihoods. So looking at these kinds of issues is very important. Similarly, if women do not own assets, then they might not be able to access financing or loans to cope with the disaster. We also know that women are more likely to be engaged in informal work compared to men. So obviously, for somebody who has an informal job and a disaster strikes, they cannot take sick leave, or they cannot have medical insurance to see a doctor, for instance, right? So all of these issues are very, very relevant. We also see differentials on how people use their time when a disaster strikes, right? So for instance, say imagine a disaster strikes and then schools are closed, right? So who's going to take care of the children that are now at home? Or who's going to take care of all those people that are injured? It's typically the women who spend more time doing these activities. Not only that, but also when natural resources are compromised as a result of disasters. For instance, water sources are contaminated, or perhaps forests remain inaccessible as a result of the disasters, etc. It is women who typically spend the most time going and fetching that water and that firewood. So calculating these statistics in the context of disasters, who spend that time and who's in charge of those activities, is very, very important. And finally, the last box is really a bit more forward-looking, so not in the immediate aftermath of disasters, but more how resilient are people to disasters. So part of it touches on asset ownership, like we were discussing before, and the importance of calculating census-aggregated asset ownership statistics, but also who's making decisions. So who's making decisions in terms of preventing or reducing the acceleration of climate change and causing more disasters, right? Around sustainable livelihoods, around what's produced and consumed in the household, or at work, who's the manager making decisions in certain polluting industries, etc. But also in the aftermath of disasters, who's making these decisions on the management of the shelter, the products that are delivered for the people to use, right? Is it men or is it women? And do these decisions really respond to men and women's needs? Similarly, in the case of rebuilding after disasters, right? Like all the infrastructures that we rebuild and all the help that we provide to the victims, do they respond to everybody's needs? Finally, in the area of resilience, it's important to know that we know from statistics that men rely on a much wider variety of sources of income, while women are much more likely to rely on income from family businesses and income from savings, as well as loans from friends and family. So obviously, when a disaster strikes, having a wider variety of sources of income is going to help you cope much better and be more resilient for future disasters. Similarly, having access to health insurance and social protection, etc., are going to help to make you a bit more resilient. And since women are more likely to be engaged in informal employment, this is all different between men and women. So that's it. I'll leave it at that. Basically, just highlighting the importance of really looking at some of those gender differentials. So disaggregating the data and calculating some very specific indicators on, the types of health services or the types of assets that people use or the type of, how people spend their time, etc. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for your presentation and for also sticking to the time. And I see that your presentation has generated a couple of interesting comments in the chat line. There's a suggestion from Saiful Mahdi to move the box on death and injuries as the last one, especially as, fair enough, as you're planning the response, as we all should start with the capacity to cope box. And there's another comment that says, is there a differentiation between disasters versus peacetime when collecting the data? This comment, apologize if I don't read the name correctly, is from Litea Bukoto. So would you like to take those points on, Sarah?
Yeah, on moving the box, absolutely. Yeah, I kind of just like placed the boxes a bit randomly, right? Like I was thinking about some of the main topics and just place them there, kind of like to steer a little bit of discussion and to highlight what the differences were. What was the second question? Sorry, I don't think I understood.
The difference is in the chat line as well. The difference between disaster versus peacetime, or let's say no crisis time, I assume, when collecting the data.
Oh, I see. Yeah, so a lot of this data obviously does not need to be necessarily collected at a time when a disaster has happened, right? Like all the data on resilience, all the data on asset ownership, obviously is the pre-existing characteristics to the disaster, right? So that data can and is already being collected in many countries. So it can just help inform some of the decisions around preventing disasters, coping with disasters, etc. But some other of this data, like deaths, injuries, etc., that's obviously immediately or soon after the disaster. Same thing with the time use data. We can collect time use data now, but we know the time allocation changes once crisis happens. So for instance, right now, we have been collecting time use data in the context of COVID-19, and we have seen significant shifts in how people spend their time. So yeah, I think that it's a balance.
Thank you so much. And I see Tim Wilcox has a hand up. Tim, go ahead.
Yeah, no, thanks. No, thanks, Letitia, for that question. For the Sendai Framework Monitor, we would encourage people to record, data from hazards as well. It doesn't, state of emergency doesn't necessarily have to be declared. We see a lot of damage and loss being done by annual, localized hazards such as flooding, etc., that may not necessarily involve deaths or overwhelming the community. But when you add all that up, it has an cumulative effect where a lot of damage and loss is actually being done to the community. Say, for example, if there's flooding in Nandi, for example, a state of national emergency may not have been declared, but because the system was coping, but we would still like to see that recorded in the monitor as well. Otherwise, we're not getting the full picture of what's affecting the country and the community. Over.
Great, thank you. There's a hand up from Noor Vandi as well. Noor, would you like to come in? Or you changed your mind about making your point? While we wait for Noor to come in, I also see a question from Slamet Suotomo. Please inform whether disaster relates to losing life and assets. I think I can answer the question myself, but I will refer to Tim and the guidance of the Sendai Framework Monitor on this. Tim, would you quickly come in on this, please?
Yeah, I mean, again, you could have a disaster, but no one dies. That's basically the answer. And in that case, we would like the data to be recorded on that. And Fiji is probably a good example where, lately they've been having a lot of, cyclones over the past few years, but the number of deaths has actually been quite small because they've been doing a lot of work in resilience building. Or you could have like a major flood in Nandi, for example, with the whole downtown floods, but no one actually dies. But we would still like to
so
do that.
Yes. The quick answer to the question is yes.
Sorry.
Assets.
Yes.
No, not at all. Don't apologize. Yes, it does impact assets and life and livelihoods, basically. So unless Noor Noor Vandi. I apologize for the terrible pronunciation, I'm sure. Maybe Noor, you can unmute yourself if you want to.
Hello. Hello, yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm interested in I first joined in this meeting, so I'm very glad to know and how to see in disaster related to statistics. Currently, we are planning to have improvement environmental economic statistics in Cambodia. So we request to the UN ESCAP and UNDP in Cambodia. Now we have a technical assistance from the UNDP that but it's not just that, but we plan to do that. We will have a short meeting, virtual meeting in next month. Because UNDP also they have provided technical assistance to develop the framework of the environmental economic statistics. So I hope that disaster should be included. But I saw that the presentation for disaggregate the woman related to time use. That I concerned about that how to disaggregate the data to help the by the gender related to the disaster. I'm not sure, but we can stop discuss furthermore during the development of the framework. Yeah, thank you.
Coming back to the thing of Alex.
I cannot hear you. You're not. I cannot hear.
My apologies. My apologies. I was actually thanking you warmly for your point, which is very well taken and very important, and also offers a good segue to, in fact, my closing reflection that the importance of disaster statistics for a broad range of sectors, very much impacting on the economic as well as the environmental situation, as you were referring to. So thank you for that, and also for highlighting the importance for interagency and close collaboration across UN agencies. I was pleased to hear that you're working with UNDP and ESCAP in Cambodia. I saw in the chat line in the meantime that we were joined by the Deputy Secretary in the Ministry of Disaster Management and Relief of Bangladesh. So we welcome and we thank for the kind notice in the chat line. And I have another comment that says, oh, that's very good. Thank you for Sir Mr. Sutomo says, please inform how we use past data for the purpose of helping people occurring disasters at present. If I may, I have a long history in humanitarian relief and humanitarian action. So perhaps with the permission of the fellow panelists, I can take a stab at this. What is really important is to understand, as Sarah was saying, the impact. If you have real-time impact on an actual event, you can then plan accordingly your preparedness and response for future events, mindful of how women, and not only women, vulnerable. That's why it's so important that disaggregation for gender, of course, but also age, disability, so that you know who were the people who were most impacted and where and how specifically, so that you can then plan your responses for future similar events accordingly. I'm seeing whether Sarah wants to come in with any additional points on this.
Thank you so much, Leticia. Yeah, no, I fully agree. I think you pretty much covered it. Just say that, you know, from our experience looking at this type of data, same thing, humanitarian or disasters, we see that the inequalities that were present prior to the disaster kind of get amplified after the disaster, right? Because all those people that didn't have assets or that didn't have access to financing are still not going to have it after a disaster when they need it most, right? So just to say that, you know, just looking generally at inequalities can give a lot of insights about how these more vulnerable people are going to be able to cope once the disaster strikes.
Thank you, Sarah. That's such a great point. It gives me the opportunity to do a shout out to our colleagues in ESCAP, and I know Sanjay Srivastava is also on this call, and their report on ESCAP, which really went into a very good, excellent level of detail in analyzing how specific disastrous events really impacted on people's lives over a very long period of time. So I'm sure we can pop into the chat link, the link to the report. And I see Rike there, so I apologize, I took a little bit longer than allotted for this session. So I'll give the floor right back to you. But thank you for this wonderful opportunity and the speakers.
Good. Thank you so much, Leticia, and thanks to Tim, Hemawanti, and Sarah as well. I think that this panel, and with all the good questions that also came in, could have probably continued for another hour. So this is something we can keep in the back of our mind for next time we meet. And thanks very much, Leticia, for moderating. I just want to add a comment that many of the questions here really showed the advantage of statisticians and disaster management agencies working together, because when we do start talking about preparedness, resilience, capacity to cope, this is where a lot of the socioeconomic and environmental statistics that's being compiled on a regular basis by national statistical offices really are useful and necessary, where we are not only talking about data that are traditionally collected when a disaster strikes. So this is where these two institutions really come together and where all can benefit from that collaboration. So thanks again to all of you in this panel. And I will just quickly hand over to the next panel and the next moderator. And this is Pucci, who you all heard from before. Pucci, take it away, please.
Thank you, Ricky. Well, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I am responsible to bring to you a panel of 4 countries to share their perspective regarding disaster-related statistics. The speaker is supposed to be Ms. Sahar Sahebi. She is the head of Group for Energy and Environmental Statistics from the Statistical Center of Iran. The second one will be Ms. Fasiti Soko. She is the director of our National Disaster Management Office in Fiji. And then Ms. Chinglun Huai, director of the Central Statistic Organizations of Myanmar. And then Mr. Georgi Sanadze, the head of Agriculture and Environmental Statistics Department of Georgia. So far, Georgie has not been able to join our meeting, but the 3 ladies are already in the room. This will not be a presentation about how good the country is in coming up with disaster statistics, but more of perspective. Even if there are issues, what are the issues? So the 3 key questions that we ask is, has the country taken any action towards producing, disseminating, or using disaster-related statistics? If yes, what are those actions, and how can the country take advantage of this technical working group? And if not, what are the issues, and how can we use this group to help address some of those issues? And I have requested the speakers to share in about 5 minutes each. I would like to call upon the first speaker, Ms. Sahar Sahebi, the head of Group for Energy and Environment Statistics, Statistics Center of Iran, who has been with the Disaster Statistic Expert Working Group for about 5 years now, I think. And last time we saw each other in Incheon. Sahar, could you take the floor, please?
Thank you, Puji. Dear colleagues, good day. And I'm talking about my country, Iran. And I can say that there are some organizations which are working and responsible about the disaster, like the NDMO and the National Disaster Research Institute and the Red Crescent. And also I can say that other ministries are cooperating with these organizations to provide and facilitate the statistics about disaster. And disaster management law was passed last year, and the duty of all ministries in different phases of disaster, like preparedness, response, and recovery, has been distinguished in this law. And also, NDMO collected and disseminated statistics about number and magnitude of some natural disaster, like earthquake, flood, snowstorm, fire, and others disaster for 2 years, for 2018 and 2019. Also, National Disaster Research Institute and NDMO, in cooperation with Tehran University, have determined the main function of disaster management and the role of different ministries in disasters. And they've just put into a table what all the ministries have the duties and what they can do. And SCI also provide the data, like demographic data, based on administrative data, surveys, and census related to disaster. And I can also say that preparedness and disseminating of disaster data needs coordination and cooperation between organizations and ministries. And creating disaster database is important, and it's necessary to determine which organization should be the focal point in creating and updating the database. And that's where we have a problem, that different agencies or organizations like NDMO or NDRI wants to create a database, and there is not a good linkage between these institutes, and the role of NSO in preparing, creating, and updating the database and collecting the data is not that much taken into account, and we should determine the role of NSO in this field. And most of the time, the NDMO doesn't have the statistical view, and its cooperation with NSO is important in preparing the database. For preparing the database, different organizations and ministries should cooperate, and the high reference organization should be responsible for coordination with these organizations. The method of collection data, definition, and dissemination should be harmonized, and that's the point that we have a problem. And we also need data about population, household buildings like schools, hospitals, dams, roads, and etc., which should be collected from different organizations, and it's important to harmonize them. And also, calculating the economic loss after disaster is important. And it's important to learn more how to calculate the economic effect after the disaster. And countries should be aware about the importance of this calculation. I think we should learn more about the role of NSO in preparing and updating the data. And also, we should learn more about the cooperation, or some of our challenges is the cooperation between ministry and organizations, and the role of NSO in this point. And we should determine a focal point in creating the database. And also, NDMO doesn't have a statistical view, and they should accept the NSO to work with them and update or create the database. Thank you.
Excellent. Sahar, thank you very much. I think this is very, very refreshing to have a very frank and candid, sharing of information. And I'm sure you're not alone. A lot of countries, as you know, facing similar challenges. And we hope this technical working group will bring in some of the tricks of how to handle that. I would like to move now to Ms. Fasiti Soko from Fiji. This is very interesting because Fasiti used to be with the Statistic Office, I believe, and now she is the director of NDMOs. So you have both statistic and disaster in one place, and with a rich of experience. Fasiti, could you take the floor, please?
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you very well. Go ahead.
Okay. So the short answer to that for Fiji is a yes. The national efforts to manage and reduce disaster risk are high on the policy agenda for Fiji. The increasing number and magnitude of disasters and the impacts on people, lives, livelihoods, and the economy and the environment have led to the adoption of the Fijian National Disaster Risk Reduction Policy in 2019. This is one of our milestones under the Sendai framework, which we have now achieved. Fiji experience on managing disaster has led to the implementation of lessons learned from previous disasters. NDMO is working tirelessly during peacetime to advocate the importance of disaster risk reduction through collaborative efforts with our partners by mainstreaming disaster risk reduction in our line of work. We encourage aligned ministries, NGOs, and vulnerable groups in taking proactive approach towards disaster risk reduction. This includes conducting baseline survey in their respective area of interest. This also includes conducting community-based disaster risk training, to which information collected from that training is shared among disaster practitioners in Fiji. And we also encourage the use of open source data with the support from our partners to better analyze the information that we advise our leaders. The current revised NDMO legislation will also ensure that all disaster-related information will be made available to NDMO when the need arises for better informed decision-making process for our decision makers. For Fiji, the National Statistical Agency, the Fiji Bureau of Statistics, we have a good association with them whereby we share data during peacetime and during response. NDMO has access to the census data from 2017, and because of collaboration efforts that happens at peacetime, we also have the latest agriculture census 2020 and key spatial layer that allows us to better inform our decision-making in conducting statistical analysis in-house. Fiji emergency structure has been proved to be successful over the years with its top-down and bottom-up approach. The Fiji NDMO reports to the National Disaster Management Council, which is chaired by the Honorable Minister responsible for NDMO. The Council has 3 subcommittees: preparedness, mitigation, and emergency. Information related to disaster required before, during, and after a disaster is disseminated through the subcommittees whose memberships are key decision makers for government. So we are able to extract the information at critical moments through respective permanent secretaries when the need arises. We are now putting more emphasis on preparedness as well, where we are trying to get information at peacetime to do analysis and better inform government about mainstreaming disaster risk reduction in our development. The NDMO works very closely with our partners in gathering important data and information, again, that will allow us to do statistical analysis and better coordinate response to our emergency and early recovery. Key functions of NDMO related to disaster risk reduction and all phases of disaster risk management cycle requires updated and accurate information to facilitate situation awareness and support decision-making for better coordination of delivery and response during disaster events. How will our region benefit from the group that we have here today? By sharing global best practices and approaches, understanding lesson learned and how different countries are overcoming the challenges, and common international standards. I'd like to conclude by saying that through the current based data exchange between the Bureau of Statistics and the NDMO over many disaster periods, a strong collaborative relationship has forged. The strong bond and collaborative provided a prerequisite for the implementation of the disaster-related statistic framework at national level. Thank you very much.
Vinaka, thank you very much, Vasiti. I think I could stand witness to that close cooperation of NDMO and Bureau of Statistics at the aftermath of the Cyclone Winston, where they both conducted the post-disaster need assessment jointly and really crunched the number together. And we're very pleased to see that this has prospered into a solid collaboration between the two and other departments. Very good. So from Iran, we went to the Pacific, and now we would like to invite you to Southeast Asia. And we have our third speaker, Ms. Chin Lun Huai, from the Director of Central Statistics Office of Myanmar. Ms. Huai, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mutputi. Good day, everybody. I'm Chin Lun Huai from Myanmar. I'm glad to talk about the disaster-related statistics in Myanmar. Disaster study has been combined in Myanmar since 2015. Disaster indicators have been shown in the publications of Myanmar Statistical Yearbook 2018 by the cooperations with the Department of DDM and JAD and CSO. There are no townships at CSO and DDM, so we are cooperating with the JAD, which have office in township level. Myanmar endorsed Myanmar Action Plan on Disaster Risk Reduction 2017 and set up 32 priority projects which cover the entire disaster management cycle and multi-sector. Then, MapDR is designed as a living document. The media implement is in line with the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction 2050 to 2030 and will be able to contribute to achieve Sendai global target through implement its priority project. In Myanmar, data availability for Sendai indicator are 55% available, 16 unavailable, 29 partially available. Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction product a systematic approach to reduce disaster risk and resilient building. It also serves as a guidance policy for disaster risk management at the national and global level. National implementation of Sendai framework may help contribute to achieve sustainable development goals and other related global agenda. It indicates political will and commitment for translating Sendai framework into local action is very crucial for Myanmar. Moreover, the success of Sendai framework implement can only be measured by quality and disaggregate data, and then more effort and should be made for ensuring to have the data needed for Sendai indicator. In Myanmar, we have localized sustainable development. Is Myanmar Sustainable Development Plan (MSDB) is drawn by our government. This MSDB is linked with global agenda, regional agenda, and national level commitment. At the same time, we are also integrate Sendai framework indicator with the MSDB. CSO organized National Indicator Framework (NIF) for monitoring the implementation of MSDB. There are 286 indicators in NIF. Among them, 40% are related with SDG. Disaster-related statistics in the NIF are annual loss in agricultural production due to flooding and drought, risk information, early warning system for disaster management, disaster risk reduction in line with the Sendai framework. State and region government allocate to disaster risk reduction and contingency funding for disaster and recovery on the preventions, protections, and conservations of all culture and natural heritage. We are in now going process. In my country, challenges is good cooperation and coordination between department and integrated. Infrastructure is limited sources, but it is important to invest as much as possible for strategical development. Now, and then constituency data collecting format and procedure, system and challenges is systematic data management and sharing, and coordinating body or system of management of disaster damage and losses data. Now, and then standardizations of units reporting cycle to align with the international practice. Training and capacity for government official on disaster need training and capacity building for government official on the disaster related statistics. In Myanmar, is that all what I would like to share with you, and thank you for your kind attention. Thank you, Pushi.
Kachute Mare, thank you very much. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have. Could you mute your microphone, please? Thank you. Now we're expecting the fourth speaker from Georgia, but I'm not sure if he is in the room. Could you confirm if you're in the room, Georgie? No. Georgie was informing me that he was in other meeting. So if he's here, he should raise his hand. In any case, we have about a couple of minutes to respond to some of the questions. Some of the questions that I have here is from Denise Ballesteros from the Philippines. Denise, you like to speak up?
Hi, Mr. Puji.
Sige na, Mare.
Okay na po, nasagot na yung question ko.
Okay lang.
Okay. Hi everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Denise from Philippines. I am just interested on how the NDMO and the NSO work together on the disaster database, because here in the Philippines, our safekeeping of the disaster data is quite Jurassic, if I may say. We are still using Excel as up to this day, and we are trying to update it. However, our projects are still ongoing. So Fiji already responded to me that they use ArcGIS. So it's one of the things that we are looking right now on how we are going to use spatial data for our disaster database. So that's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. All right. We have also comment from Susil Bhai from Kathmandu.
Good afternoon from Kathmandu.
Namaste.
Yeah, namaste. Basically, NSO, Central Bureau of Statistics of Nepal, is publishing environment statistics of Nepal regularly, and we collect the secondary data related to disaster and publish in our publication. And in 2016, we conducted the National Climate Change Impact Survey. There is one thematic area related to disaster. Some data we collected from that survey also. So my query or my assumption is that it is essential to conduct census and the surveys related to disaster, because Nepal is one of the disaster prone country. So for the policymaker, all these things, it is needed the disaster related data. So my view is that it is necessary to conduct the disaster related census and surveys in Nepal. If other countries had that kind of experiences, it is needed to share, and ESCAP can help for this. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Susil, for the comments. So I think what we see here, colleagues, example from experience from Iran, for example, there are expert agencies, NDMOs, the disaster research, and there are CSOs. But what the need is the connecting mechanisms among those expert agencies to make data meaningful. We have an example where in Fiji, the NDMO and Bureau of Statistics are well connected and they do activities together. In the case of Myanmar, they have a platform, the policies and programs that encourage them to work together. In Nepal, we have seen that the statistics are undertaking some survey and census with some matter pertaining to disasters. So the question that may be worth discussing briefly would be, what is the chance of establishing a common standard across the agency so that the data will speak to one another and useful for all, right? So that's my comment. Is there any other question? Anybody who would like to raise their hand?
Thank you. Thank you.
Susil, you want to speak again?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, just keep it there. Now, what I can do is I could request our speakers, our distinguished speakers, to give a closing remark and response. Sahar, would you like to have your 1 minute, closing remarks? Closing statement. Sahar? Okay, you might.
Puji.
Yes, Sahar, go ahead.
Thank you. I just can say that the relation of NDMO and NSO is important, and that's good that I hear that in Fiji and Myanmar, this relationship. And I think we should work more on this relationship in just harmonizing the definitions, the data, and making a good database related to disaster.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, I guess you're lucky because you have Letitia's organization, the ABDIN in Tehran. And,
yes.
And we have a good example from Indonesia where PPS and NDMO have an MOU established for them to work together. Pasiti, do you like to have some closing statement from your side? Pasiti?
Yes.
Yes, please.
Just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for allowing Fiji, who's going to represent the Pacific as part of the technical working group. We hope we can draw from the experiences of what the other development countries are doing in the space of disaster statistics where we can better inform our decision makers. We look forward to the leadership of our chair, and we look forward to sharing experiences, lesson learned, and building towards better collaboration for all countries in Asia Pacific for the near future. Pinaka.
Pinaka, thank you very much, Fasiti. And also, we would like to, from Secretariat and all of us, to welcome you as the 5th chair. And it's, as Tim was saying, it's critical to have the Pacific sitting in the leadership of the technical working group. Very well. Can I have Ms. Huai to give a closing statement if there is any? Ms. Huai?
Yeah, Mr. Puji. Yeah, in my experience, we in my country we collect the disaster statistic. It's very hard to very difficult to collect disaster data. Is different type, different time, different place. Is a very difficult to combine, which process of the indicator is my experience. But now we are a good cooperation, and now we are sharing the statistic awareness, and they know that the statistic awareness and knowledge collector where know the statistic is more very important
for
things
all.
is yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That
Thank you, Ms.
this
Wai.
my
That's
experience. No.
excellent. Thank you very much. Our friend Ismail from Malaysia have written in the big characters in the chat box. Right? Let me read this. In Malaysia, disaster-related data are scattered across various agencies, which is true in all countries. The data collection is based on their own purposes and objective, which is also true. What is your point of view in which agencies should take lead in data coordination, frequent of data reporting, while without jeopardizing their objective and purposes? Now, we have 3 presenters, but Indonesia was presenting earlier. I was wondering, Ibu Wanti, would you like to respond to this? Which agencies ideally should collect the data, and what how frequent and all that? Ibu Wanti, could you pick up this? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. It is true that the data regarding a disaster is it's produced by many agencies. In Indonesia, we are trying to compile it together. We have a multi-sectoral meeting to discuss about the data, and now we are working on have one data on disaster. So we trying to have one standard reference and also metadata all together. So in Indonesia, the role of National Statistic Office BPS become higher, but the data will be put in together in one platform produced by BNPB National Disaster Agency. So we work on it together. We try to make a standard, one reference, and also one metadata. That's one policy by Indonesian government, that in all sector we should have one data in all sector, included in the disaster. Yeah.
Okay.
So we can use it. Interoperability of the data will become happen. That's the experience in Indonesia. It's true that the data is in many agency, but now we are to make it all together, so all the data can be interoperability. And I think we don't need to have in experience of Indonesia, we don't need to have a disaster census, because actually we can get the data from the agency, but we only need to have one reference, one standard, one metadata. So the data can be produced by their own agency, but it can be used interoperability altogether. This is experiences in Indonesia.
Thank you. I hope that responds to the question from Ismail. But look, if this is not sufficient, because this is a quick meeting, Kuala Lumpur is not too far away from Jakarta. You might as well fly here after the COVID. Or better still, we can ask Rike and colleague here to have a special meeting, a smaller meeting, and have this more intense conversation about particular topic within disaster statistics, right? Abang Ismail, is that okay? All right, colleagues. With that, I think we have an extensive conversation. I would like to thank our speakers, Sahar Sahibi from Tehran, Ms. Fasiti Soko from Suva, and then Ms. Y from Yangon. Thank you very much for sharing your experience, and I would like to thank the participants for the question and discussion. Rike, over to you.
Thank you very much, Puji, for excellent moderation here, and thank you to Sahar, Vasiti, and Chinghuai for your really valuable inputs. I believe that this conversation, for me, looks like there is a big area of work for this working group to really talk about how agencies best collaborate, how we ensure data interoperability, and what are the respective responsibilities of different agencies, because as was rightly mentioned in a question, well, each agency is put in place with a particular purpose. How do we work together on the data while at the same time we can all continue to do the task of our respective agency? And if we look at statistical agencies and disaster management agencies, they are put into this world with very, very different purposes. And I do believe that one of the tools we should maybe pull out in some of our discussions going forward is the disaster management cycle, where we've looked at the type of data that's needed in different phases of the disaster management cycle, and the kind of statistics which would more typically be produced by statistical officers. In terms of which agency is best placed to maybe have the overall coordination responsibility for data, for me, this is something where we probably will not have the same right answer in each country. It is something that is extremely dependent on the context, on the various institutions, and the regulations that are also in place for disaster risk reduction and management, and for official statistics production. So for me, this is where we really get from the more normative work into more of the practice, where I see a lot of potential for sharing experiences and good practices, how this can actually work. So we are moving nicely into the last segment of today's meeting, because this is where we all have a chance, on the basis of what we've heard today, to indicate what should really be the priorities of work of this group going forward. And we will be doing a little speed poll at this point in time of the meeting, using the Mentimeter that you've all become used to now. Before you start clicking, let me just mention to you to calm you down, that what we see in this particular poll now is not going to constitute the work program of this group going forward. What we really would like to have is, after we've all listened now to each other for around 2 hours, what comes up in your mind as absolute priorities that we should keep in mind when we develop our work plan. And we will be supplementing this speed poll with a questionnaire we will be circulating to all of you, where you have a chance to reflect a little bit more on your answers and inputs. And what we will gather from that questionnaire is then what we here in the Secretariat will be looking at and putting together what could be a proposed plan of work for this group, which we will all have a chance to look at and comment at one of our future meetings. So the poll is open now, and just to give you some ideas, try to put just one word into the poll, yes, you're already starting. It's wonderful. It's looking good. I see country lessons, research agenda, mitigation statistics, mechanisms, capacity building, tools. Oh, this is wonderful. This is wonderful. Capacity building is in the lead at the moment. But this is great. We've heard today from a lot of experts in this group. I've been so pleased with seeing so many familiar faces today and listening to so many familiar voices. And that means that the body of expertise that was really built in the initial work to develop the disaster-related statistics framework is still present in our new group, which is so good, because how do we build capacity as a group? Well, that is something we do by learning from each other and sharing our respective expertise. So capacity building, definitely a front runner here. It can take many different shapes, and some of the shapes it can take are reflected in some of the smaller wording here. Gender data has entered the race here. Country lessons is still going strong. Statistics, networking. Okay, this is wonderful. We definitely have a lot of good initial ideas, and we will also be using these to shape up the questionnaire that we will design and circulate to all of you. We might want to ask for some elaborations of some of the winning suggestions here. As I said, capacity building can take many shapes and forms. Okay, so you are welcome to continue to type in, those of you who haven't responded to the poll yet. What I just want to do now is to talk a little bit about what's ahead for this working group. Now, you all have received circulars that includes names of people in the ESCAP Secretariat you can contact. All of you are welcome to use those email addresses, whether there's a questionnaire or not. We are always welcoming ideas and suggestions. And I just want all of you to have a face behind those email addresses, because this is also my opportunity to thank the team behind this meeting. So I will just ask Maria, Paul, and Ing, could you please switch on your cameras so that people can see who you are?
Hello, I'm Maria. The name that you often see in all of the emails and communications from ESCAP.
Wonderful, Maria. So yes, you will all have probably received emails from Maria or seen her email address. Ing, can we see your face, please?
Hello, everyone. My name is Nalilat, or you can call me Ing. I'm the assistant to ESCAP Secretariat, Statistics Division. Thank you.
Yes, and you see here the tradition of Thai nicknames in action. You all read Nalin Rut in the email, but this is Ing. That's how I know her. So thank you very much, Ing. You've been very active on the chat box today, and Paul, who's whose name is Pierpat is just saying, well, I'm sharing my screen now, so I can't put on the camera. So I think we are done with the poll, Paul, so you can stop sharing your screen and instead put on your camera.
I'm Pierpat, so I've been supporting Maria on this workshop and will be for the next ones as well. So please feel free to reach me.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you very much. So to all participants, these are the three lovely ladies who's always there to receive ideas. And there's also a lovely man, Pucci, who's also there to support. I hope you all have some faces now. And Sushil, it's great to see your face again. What the last thing I want to say before we close the meeting, and I'll also open up if anyone wants to put some other matters or something, we've been discussing the frequency of meetings of this group. And given we are looking at virtual meetings, we are thinking of having relatively frequent meetings, but relatively short meetings. And we are thinking of a monthly meeting, for example, the last Wednesday every month. And we can always, on an ad hoc basis, have more frequent meetings if some people want to get together on some specific topic. We'll make it very open. Virtual meetings are a bit easier and less resource intensive than physical meetings. So we would be very happy to organize relatively frequent meetings. Now, we will also be seeking your views on this particular topic in the questionnaire I referred to. So we will also be asking you on your views on how often should the group meet, and what are the topics, how would we like to run the meetings. We'll of course have much more active leadership by our chair and vice chairs going forward. So you will be seeing much more of them and much less of me going forward. And you've all had a chance to listen both to the chair and the two vice chairs today, so you can see we have a real expert group leading our work. So I'm so pleased with that. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much both to our speakers, moderators, all the participants who put in their comments and questions. And we just have 2 minutes. If anyone would like to add something at this point in time of the meeting. While you are thinking, I will just mention that Ing Nalinrud has just circulated in the meeting chat a questionnaire, so you can give some feedback on this first meeting of the group. We'll really appreciate your feedback there. Good. I see no hands raised. I see a lot of thanks in the chat boxes. Great. Pucci, do you want to say anything?
From my side, Rike, just thanking everyone for the participation. It's wonderful to have this very active conversation, and look forward to the next one. And in between, we have the e-training that we would offer, and we'll communicate further on that. And also, we look forward to sending some further questionnaire. And anyone who have an idea to have a smaller meeting or specific purpose, just let us know. Just that, Rike, thanking everybody.
Okay, well, thank you, Pucci, and thanks again, all of you. And if not earlier, then we'll all touch base in a month from now. And as Pucci mentioned, when we are ready to roll out the e-learning, you'll also hear from us. And this is a pilot e-learning where comments and suggestions for improvement would also be very, very welcome. So thank you very much, and goodbye from Bangkok, from me and from ESCAP. And Pucci sits in Jakarta saying goodbye. And Sushil puts on his camera from Kathmandu.
Thank you, Ricky. Goodbye.
Yes. Bye-bye. Take care.
Okay,
Bye, everybody. See you.
Already. Bye-bye, Sahab.
Bye.